we'll get started. Yeah, thank you, Oliver. Hi, good evening, everyone. It's 8:05. All right. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to yet another exciting monthly session organized by the NAIJA Java user group. I'm really glad to have you all here tonight. So for those joining us for the first time, I just want to take like a minute, to tell you guys about the NAIJA Java user group. Yeah, so the NAIJA-JUG is a community-driven platform dedicated to bringing together Java developers, across the world, Nigeria and beyond, right? Then our mission is centered around, learning, collaboration, and professional growth within the Java ecosystem, through monthly sessions like this, technical workshop like we usually have, and also boot camp like the ongoing one. So the aim is basically to build a strong, space where developers can, easily connect at all stages, right? So, and also, we would love you to become part of our community, and we'll be dropping links to our various channels, and would want you to join and stay connected, to future events and learning opportunities and other discussions. Now, moving forward straight into today's session, we are incredibly excited to host Josh Long, a world-renowned Spring developer advocate. Tonight, Josh will be taking us through, a deep dive covering Spring Boot. This session is packed with practical insight, architectural best practices, and real-world approaches to building modern Java applications. So whether you are just starting out or, already an, experienced software engineer, there is valuable takeaway for everyone tonight. So before we begin, we would also want to extend our appreciation to JetBrain for their generous support, in making sessions like this possible. So thank you all for joining us. We encourage you to stay engaged and share your questions in the chat box. Now, so please join me in welcoming Mr. Josh Long. Yeah, so Josh, you have the floor. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. I am always grateful to have the chance to talk to people, but Java user groups are my absolute favorite because, most Java user groups that I go to is it true? A lot of the ones I go to, not most, but a lot of them are on the weekend. I'm not sorry, they're on the weekdays, and these user groups are usually after work, right? And so in my mind, like, if you're choosing to hang out and talk about software with me or anybody really after work, after a long day at the office, and you're choosing to ignore your family possibly or whatever, these are the people I want to talk to, right? But this is even the people that show up on the weekend. Yeah, I love that. I mean, these are my people right here. So I am so happy to be here with y'all tonight. I am in Kyoto, Japan right now. And so while it is late in Saturday evening for you, it's 4 in the morning and Sunday morning for me. And I am just as happy as I can be. This is about as much fun as you can have it at 4 in the morning on a Sunday. So I'm very, very honored. I wanted to take a poll here. Where are we in our journey? How many of you are using Spring Boot? Let's say. Just show of hands. Spring Boot. Okay, I don't know how to gauge feedback here. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. 6, 7, 8. 10. Like, what I'm trying to figure out is, would it be helpful to cover the beautiful basics, before I dive into some of the more latest and greatest stuff? I see 12 people using Spring Boot. By the way, how much time do we have? Do we actually have 90 minutes? Is that okay? Can we do 90 minutes? Or 2 hours?
Yeah, actually, we have 2 hours. We have 2 hours from now till 10. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go as long as the coffee carries me. Okay,
Uh,
I'm going to do a quick primer. We'll just recap some of the basics, and I find that the basics are more important than ever. And then we'll dive into the latest and greatest, of which there's a lot. Okay, so let's just dive right into it. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. How do I hide this? Oh, hi, Saif from Cameroon. Lovely to talk to you. Can you all still see me and hear me? Yeah, okay, good. Oh, that's interesting. Look at that. If I close this. Okay, goodbye. I've got that window closed. Okay, and by the way, I love your page. It's very celebratory. So my friends, we just live in an amazing moment right now, right? We live in an amazing time, and there's just so much to talk about. So I don't really know where to begin. I suppose the natural place is just to start at the very beginning. My name is Josh Long. I work on the Spring team. I'm super happy to be here. I run a YouTube channel with my friend Deshaun and my friend James Ward. This YouTube channel is called Coffee Software. Please join the adventure. It's not the worst mistake you can make. It's a lot of fun. And I'm on LinkedIn. Please, join me there, connect. Let's hang out there. Email if you have questions, comments. And the code for what we're going to look at is here. Now, there's nothing there yet. I haven't written the code, obviously, but we will. That's the point, right? So just bookmark that for yourself for later, and I will, whatever we type today, whatever code gets done tonight, this morning, this evening, whatever, I'll be sure to chuck into that Git repository just as soon as I can. Okay. So what I want to talk to you about is just some of the latest and greatest in the wide world of Spring. And you might know that last November of 2025, we released Spring Framework 7, and on top of that, Spring Integration, Data. Let me see, Integration, Data, Security, Batch. All the projects, right? All those projects, and then on top of that, and when I say on top of that, what I mean is we have, this is the core dependency that all of these projects share, and then Spring Boot has all of these projects as its dependency, and then Spring Boot 4, of course, is the release, and then of course we have projects that depend on Spring Boot, like Spring Cloud, AI, Modulith, etc. And this is a huge release. I mean, this is one of the biggest releases. Obviously, a new generation. I mean, this whole thing is a new generation, right? And we were excited to kind of, I don't know, if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, I think some of us were expecting to be able to, once this major generational release, the big release that was planned for 4 years, once that was out the door, I'll bet some of us thought we could just sit back and take a little easy just for a minute. I mean, the next release would be surely jam-packed with lots of good stuff, but resting was definitely not in the cards. You see, earlier this year, as you might have noticed, these AI frontier models started to get really good at discovering vulnerabilities. And actually, it's not even that they started to become good recently. They've been good for a long time. I suppose what's happened is that now security researchers are very good at using them to discover vulnerabilities. And so you might have heard about all these different open source projects being besieged, overwhelmed with information and CVE reports. Now, CVEs are, critical vulnerability? Nope. It's what does CVE stand for? I don't even know. It doesn't see. What does CVE stand for? Okay. Just gonna common vulnerabilities and exposures. I knew that. I was just that's a fact that I have before midnight, but at 4 in the morning, it's a fact I no longer have. And so we have lots of different CVEs that are just everywhere now, right? All these different websites. And a lot of times these CVEs are minor. They're small CVEs. And so there have been some CVEs discovered in Spring. Quite a few, in fact. And this has become a bit of a priority. So for example, a lot of these are like, and you can go to spring.io/security, and you'll see all these new security advisories, these new CVEs. But the thing to understand is that we don't get this many CVEs most of the time, right? I think we averaged about 1.5 CVEs per month before, right? And if you look at this list, you'll see dozens. I mean, this is just June 10th to June 12th, all of those, right? And then you go down to page 2, June 10th, all the way down here. Still June 9th, right? And you go, you get the idea. There's probably hundreds here. I don't know. There's more than 50, I'll bet. I didn't count them. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's more than we normally get in a year, and we just got that in just in the last few weeks, right? And so it's become more critical than ever, is I guess what I'm trying to say, is if you're a Spring user, please upgrade, right? We want you to upgrade. It's important that you upgrade because you have open source support. You've probably seen our support timelines. These green boxes indicate the time in which a particular version of the project is guaranteed support from the team in open source. You can pay and get the enterprise support if you want. That's the yellow box. But I would just please upgrade. Then you don't need to pay. It's better for everybody if you upgrade. And it's also very good if you're upgrading, as quick as possible, right? Because remember, what we do is we take, when these security researchers discover these vulnerabilities, they report them to the Spring team privately. There's a separate channel. These do not go on GitHub issues, and they go to a separate channel that is private. We, validate them if they're real or not, and if they are real, we fix them. We release a patch, and that patch goes on to into Maven Central, and that patch is there for some time, usually days or some amount of time. No guarantee, but more than just a few minutes, obviously. And it's there on Maven Central. So when we say, hey, there's a new version of Spring, whatever, you should be aware there might be CVEs in there, but you don't know necessarily which ones. And the reason you don't know which ones is because we want people to upgrade, and then responsible disclosure being what it is, we then announce the CVEs. And so the CVEs are like a dinner bell for bad actors. That's why we have a little bit of time between when we release the thing that has the fix and when we tell the world that there is a vulnerability in the first place. If you are quick, you can get the code and deploy it to production and be safe long before anybody realizes that it's a possibility to be exploited. So I just generally want to encourage you to please upgrade, okay? So see, we've got a lot of good stuff in the new release, and obviously the CVE situation is, I think, the thing that is most eyebrow raising for a lot of people, right? I mean, it's not just Spring, obviously, it's everything. It's all these different, you saw in the news, I think I saw the FreeBSD they had somehow discovered a bug that had been dormant in arguably the most secure operating system, and it had been dormant there for 20 years. I mean, just a totally different world that we live in. And so all these CVs have meant that we on the Spring team worked really hard to add some features, but we really had to prioritize stability, right? It's very important. So we worked night and day on these CVs for the last, and it's most of the time when we do a release, it comes out every 6 months. But here we waited almost 7 months to release this new 4.1 release of the framework. That's a totally different thing. Normally Java comes out every 6 months, Spring Boot comes out every 6 months. But here it was 7 months. It's been quite the roller coaster just the last several months, I'm telling you. So please upgrade. Now, you should upgrade because it's good. It's good CVE hygiene to upgrade. It's good for safety. It's good for being in support, but there's also a whole bunch of amazing features as well. So let's talk about that now that we've got the sort of scary stuff out of the way. And it's not really that scary. I mean, what the message I'm trying to give you is, hey, there are tools you can use that are open. So, Dependabot or whatever, these things can tell you when dependencies have been updated in Maven Central, and you just update. Just do that. Most of the time, it's pretty trivial, and you'll be secure and in production in no time. Okay. But there's a lot of new features. So I want to show you these new features, and it's always weird doing these demos. I love doing demos. It's weird showing you these demos in a vacuum. I like to have a domain. And so my favorite domain, my favorite thing to talk about is animals. And you might know about, of course, the Spring Pet Clinic. This is a sample application from the Spring team. Here it is, updated as recently as just a week ago. Obviously, this gets updated all the time, but it is a 20-plus-year-old project. It's very popular, and there's even a whole GitHub organization full of Spring Pet Clinic implementations that are sort of, it's a riff on the theme, different implementations. But I love the animals. I love the dogs and the cats. I think it's a fun domain, but there's just too much. And so I like to focus on dogs and cats, but I want to focus on one dog in particular. This is one of my favorite dogs. His name is Prancer. Prancer's owner was trying to find a new home for this dog way back in April of 2021. And she wrote this hysterical ad on Facebook trying to solicit a new home for this dog. She says, okay, I've tried for the last 7 months to post this dog for adoption and make him sound palatable. The problem is he's just not. There's not a very big market for neurotic, man-hating, animal-hating, children-hating dogs that look like gremlins. But I have to believe there's someone out there for Prancer because I'm tired, and so is my family. Every day we live in the grips of the demonic Chihuahua hellscape he has created in our home. If you own a Chihuahua, you probably know what I'm talking about. He's literally the Chihuahua meme that describes him as being 50% hate and 50% trouble. So anyway, she goes on and on and on. It's a really, really fun ad. Needless to say, very cute dog. I think about this dog a lot. And if you're wondering, this dog was eventually adopted. Here's People magazine talking about the dog. Here is USA Today. This is a newspaper in the United States talking about this doggo as well. Where's the photo? Where's our photo? Whatever. And here is BuzzFeed News talking about this cute doggo. Right there he is right there. Look at that. So adorable. And of course, here is the New York Times. So, this dog went mega viral, right? Everybody knew about this dog, and he did eventually get adopted. But I think we should build something to help with that process. So let's do exactly that. And we're going to start at the absolute basics and then work our way through a bunch of new features, okay? So we're going to go here, and we're going to build an adoptions service. And we have some choices we need to make, my friends. Let me see what happens if I click on that. Go back over here. We have to choose a version of Java. Now, friends, I'm going to be using, I've got 4 radio boxes here. We keep 4 radio boxes. The current supported long-term version of Java, is Java 25. And so, that's a good choice. Java 26 is the current supported version of Java. Although, keep in mind, I think this is middle-aged, right? I mean, Java 27 is almost here, right? I think we have fewer days between now and Java 27 than we do from between Java 25 and 26, right? Because it comes out every 6 months. And it's already been more than 3 months, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's been more than 3 months since Java 26. So all that to say, I would start downloading Java 27, checking it out. I'm going to be using the long-term supported version of Java 25. I'm a huge fan. You have to understand, these are technically superior in every way. They're faster, more secure, more syntax rich, more performant, more operations friendly, more robust. They're technically superior in every way. They're also morally superior. You won't like the look of sadness and shame in your children's eyes when they see that you're using Java 17 in production. Don't do this. Be the change you want to see in the world. Do the right thing. Use the latest and greatest, okay? And obviously, it's mathematically superior. I don't think this is controversial, right? This is inarguable. 25 is more than 3 times greater than Java 8. That's just a fact. I mean, 3 times 8 is 24, and this is 25. So it's an amazing release, and it has one of my all-time favorite features. Watch this. I'm just going to open this up. Okay, void main, And we'll just open this up here. Hi, okay. I'm going to just execute that by passing it to the Java CLI. I'm not even going to compile it. I didn't compile it. I just passed it in like a script. That's right. You know what that is? Do you know what this is? This is the world's first good JavaScript. Okay. Very, very big fan. So we've got that. Now let's go ahead and build our application up. And, I think we're going to need the dev tools to do live reloads. I love the dev tools. We're going to use the web support. We're going to use the HTTP client support. We'll bring in the actuator and the open telemetry support. We'll bring in the Graalvm native image support. And we want a database. So I'll be using an ORM, an object relational mapper, like Spring Data JDBC. And I'm going to be talking to Postgres, so I'll bring that in as well. Maybe we'll bring in the WebAuthn support and the security support and the auth client support. I don't know. We haven't really figured out what we're going to do and how much time we have, but let's just do that. I'm going to open this up. I've just downloaded a zip file. You can see if I delete that zip file, do that again. There you go. I've got the zip file again. So I have an alias in my shell called UAO. It stands for unzip and open. It points to a different JavaScript that I wrote. So we're going to connect this application to a database. I've got this database running on my local machine. So we'll say password is secret, username is my user, and URL is JDBC :PostgreSQL localhost my database. Okay. Now I don't know where we stand, so let's take a step back before we even look at Spring Boot. I don't know where you all are in your journey, and I'm here in Japan. I've been talking to groups all around the country, and some of them are actually, I feel like they have been using Spring Boot, but they don't really understand the fundamentals. So I don't know if this will help you. I think maybe you probably already know most of this stuff, but I'm going to show you some of the basics, and this is some of the stuff that we used to talk about. And to be honest with you, I think I should still talk about it. I was very surprised to find out how many really smart people got some value out of this discussion. So let's do that. Let's say I want to get the data from the database, okay? And I've just deleted Spring and Spring Boot from my main method. So this is just a regular Java class. I'm using these Maven dependencies from Spring Boot, but that doesn't matter. These are just on the class path right now. Nothing is using any of them. There's no Spring in my code anymore, right? So let's say I wanted to build a thing that got me all the information about dogs, okay? So I'll build a domain model here, owner, string name, string description, and I want to return all this information about dogs. Let's just say I have a method here that is called find all, okay? Well, how would I implement that if I don't have Spring, right? Let's just say we're doing pure play Java. Well, obviously you can imagine I would do maybe a default dog repository, and you can see how I would do that. And Spring gives us 4 interesting things. Spring Framework gives us this, and so that it gives us a dependency injection. It gives us aspect-oriented programming, and it gives us portable service abstractions. Okay, and Spring Boot takes it a step further and adds one more layer called auto configuration, right? And so these things together, we used to talk about just these 3 things right here in terms of the Spring triangle, right? But I think now that we've got auto configuration, what is it? The Spring square? It doesn't sound so cool, so whatever. We got the 4 pillars of Spring. So how can they help us take this very simple goal? We want to build a repository to talk to the database. How can it help us do that? Well, let's write this code the wrong way, right? I can imagine I'm going to need a database, so I'll initialize that. I'm going to just do the wrong thing here, so I'll initialize that database directly in my code, right? So here we go, localhost my database, and it'll be my user, and it'll be secret, okay? Here we are. So I've got a secret, and I've got a data source there, and I've initialized the data source in the constructor, and now I need to actually load the data from the database. So I'll say connection equals this.db.get connection, and I'll create and of course you can see I've already got the first problem. add catch. Okay, there you go. And the next thing is I need to create the statement. So I'll do that. I want to prepare a statement, and I'll say select all from dog, I think, right? And if we look at the database console here, what do we have? Test, hit apply, okay. Go over here. It's still thinking. I don't know what's going on with IntelliJ these days. It's been erratic. So I'll just do this manually. Okay. My user, don't tell anybody this, okay? This is it's our secret. Here we go. And my database. And hit test, hit apply, hit okay. Now I've got two. Isn't that weird? It was like loading, and as soon as I open up that configuration dialog, suddenly it loads. I don't know why. So okay, I've got this database table full of dogs. You can see ID. Here's our buddy Prancer. His ID is 45. Name is Prancer. Demonic, neurotic, man-hating, animal-hating, children-hating dog. Dates, owners, etc. But I only really want just those first four columns: the ID, name, and description. So I'm going to go back to my code here and read that data. And the table is called dog. And so I'm going to read the data into a collection. So var dogs equals new array list. Okay. And I'm going to say statement.execute query var results set, right? And I'll say while that results set has more records to read, I'm going to read the records into a dog object, and I'm going to write them to this array. So I've got name, owner, description, and the ID, okay? And there we are. There's my basic code. Let's see here, dogs. Now you can see the problem with this, but let's just start it up. Let's just try making this work, okay? So var dog repository, and I say dog repository dot find all, and of course I'm going to use Java 25 here, so let's do that. Okay. All right, so it's worked. Not bad. First try, huh? So we've got this simple code reading from the database. There's no Spring at all, right? Nothing Spring related here. But let's refactor this code a little bit. So private static void test, and I'll take a dog repository, and we'll just extract that logic here to this, and I'll say test dog repository, and I'll say repository. Okay, so I've extracted out the thing that changes from the thing that is the same into a separate method here. Okay, well, what can I do to fix this code? I mean, you can already see a few things, right? I'm sure it's not hard. First of all, we can take advantage of dependency injection. That's just a fancy way of saying using constructors, right? So I'll do that here. And I'm going to pass that into the constructor. Why would I do that? Well, I mean, data sources are expensive. They take up a lot of memory. And so having that, having a singleton instance, especially if your data source has a connection pool, you want to reuse that. There's no point in every single object having their own connection pool. That would very quickly exhaust the connections available to you via your data source. So I can pass in the shared singleton reference, the single reference in the entire program into the constructor. That's dependency injection. Nothing special, but it does help. What about this code? What about all this code? What can I do to simplify this? Well, obviously, if you look at the essence of this, I want to read this, I want to run that query, and then map results using this logic here. All the rest of this is just noise, and it's very, very ugly noise. So let's try this again. Maybe I can use a portable service abstraction from Spring. These are high-level objects that simplify the low-level stuff that we have to do that makes life so tedious sometimes. So let's try using Spring Framework's JDBC client. So I'll refactor this to instead use that. So JDBC client, inject that into the constructor. And now, I can just remove all of this. Okay, return db.sql. And, there's my query. And the row mapper is just a thing that, well, you guessed it, it maps rows. So I'll say RSI returns a new dog. I guess I should say RES. Okay. And dot list. Okay. And then all that other stuff just goes away. So much noise. Now it's much cleaner. So let's try that. Okay. And obviously this doesn't need to be there. It can be an optional thing. Okay. So there you go. That's all I'm trying to do is just to return a collection of dogs, and I can write that code much more expressively by using this nice JDBC client. So my code is much cleaner now, but we still got other issues, don't we? Like if you think about what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to build a repository. I might want to handle transactions at this layer, right? Probably not. Maybe you do that at the service layer, but let's suppose I wanted to handle it at the repository layer. How would you solve that problem in an object-oriented fashion, right? How would you solve transactions in using good object-oriented design? Because if you think about good OOP, we've got DRY, don't repeat yourself, right? We want our code to be singly focused, to have one responsibility. So in good object-oriented design, you'd maybe create a transactional dog repository. So let's try that, transactional dog repository. And we have another question we have to answer here, which is, do we want to do composition or subclassing? And for our purposes, I think we're going to do composition. I'm going to create a facade using this pattern here. I'm going to have a delegate that I'll wrap, but I'm going to add code to handle the transactions. And you can kind of understand, how that would work, right? I would just go here and say this dot delegate dot find all, okay? And this brings up the next question, which is, of course, how do I handle transactions? Actually, before I even answer that, let's make sure we adapt the code here, okay? Passing in this new TX1. There you go. So the test is unaware, right? Because this is the nice thing about polymorphism. My test is asking for a dog repository, and it doesn't care that it's getting the original one or if it's getting the transactional sort of composite that wraps it, right? So the question then now is, how do I handle transactions in my transactional dog repository? Spring has this, when you think about transactions have a very simple formula, right? I start some work, do, step 1, step 2, step 3, and if I'm happy, I commit, and I try to commit. If something fails, then I can roll back, right? Very, very simple. The problem is every API that offers this notion of committing, to batch work and then write that work all in one fell swoop to the backend infrastructure, every API that has that, be it JPA or JavaOQ or JDO or Kafka, Hibernate, Eclipse, DBI, what else? AMQP, Neo4j, MongoDB, Elasticsearch, JMS, all these things. What is it called? What's the other one that's from Exposed, from Kotlin, from JetBrains? All of these technologies or data or middleware or whatever, they all have their own concept of a transaction. We can do some work, batch it, and then commit or roll it back. And all of these APIs have completely different, inconsistent APIs for doing transactions. So Spring has this thing called the Platform Transaction Manager. This has been here since 2003, right? It's been around for 23 years now, actually, yeah. It's 23, it's more than 23 years old. It was in May, it would have been 23 years old. And this interface offers 3 very simple things: get a transaction given a definition, commit the transaction, or roll it back. So let's try using that directly, okay? I'm going to need a platform transaction manager. So I'll inject that into the constructor. But we still have to initialize it. We still have to create that somewhere. So let's go do that back over here. So JDBC, I want a TX manager. I'll create a new data source transaction manager, and I've just passed that in there, okay? So data source transaction manager is an implementation of that interface for SQL, for JDBC. But of course, if you're using Kafka, then there's a Kafka transaction manager, and so on. You get the idea. There's implementations across all the Spring portfolio projects for dozens of different kinds of transaction managers, okay? And your code doesn't need to be the wiser. It just needs to know that there's an implementation of that on the class path. So how do I use that low-level API? Well, you say txman.getTransaction. In this case, I'll just accept the defaults, which gives me a transaction status. And I'm going to do try, okay, and I'll say catch, and I'll say throw a ball, and I'll say throw new runtime exception, but only after I have rolled back. So roll back transaction, okay, and I want to get the result, and I want to return the result, but only after RSELT, but only after I've committed the result. So, you can kind of see what's going on here, right? But you can already see, I think, maybe the problem with this. It's tedious, and I have to do this more than once. It's going to get very, very, very verbose very quickly. So the question then is, can I use another platform transaction, another portable service abstraction to raise the level of abstraction to make some of this boilerplate go away? Well, of course I can, right? We have in Spring the transaction template. And so you'll see transaction templates all around the framework. You'll see template patterns all around the framework, all over the place, right? So I'm going to get rid of that, and we'll move this here. And the template is a wrapper, but it makes the easy stuff, it makes the hard stuff easy, and it makes the impossible stuff possible, right? So I'm going to have a transaction template. I'll pass that in here, okay? And get rid of that. What do we got? Oh, it's the other way around, isn't it? So here we go, transaction template. Okay, now I go back here, and I've got the delegate and the transaction template. Let's see what that looks like. Well, obviously, all I really care about is calling the method inside of a transaction. So now I can just use the template. Anything I pass into that lambda will be wrapped in a transaction. It'll get the transaction, it'll do a try catch, it'll handle the error case and roll back, or it'll commit if everything goes to plan. So this removes quite a bit of verbosity in the code, doesn't it? So that's a portable service abstraction. Okay, well, I mean, not bad, right? Not bad at all. It's clearly an improvement, but I still have to do this for every single method if I'm doing good object-oriented design. So the question is, how can I centralize this logic? Because I don't want to have to create a new class that has transactions every time I want to introduce transactions, and I certainly don't want to have to add a new method every single time I add a method down over here. I don't want to have to add another one over here. It would get very tedious very quick. And here, object-oriented design fails, right? Object-oriented design wants to handle one concern at a time, right? This class handles one concern, being transactional for dog repositories, deep hierarchies of types. But how do you handle transactions for all types? Well, this is where we get into we're kind of outside of the comfort zone for object-oriented languages. And we're going to try something a little meta programming, okay? And I don't, if you have young children watching, maybe they should cover their eyes, because we're going to do meta programming, right? This is not great stuff, and hopefully you never have to do it, but it is kind of illustrative and helpful to understand what's happening. So let's imagine we had some way in Java to programmatically implement an interface, okay? So let's try that. Well, it turns out we do, right? We have something called a proxy, Java Lang Reflect proxy. And I'm going to give it the class loader here. I'll say adoptions application.class.get class loader. And I'm going to tell it I want to create a bean. What is the bean? I want to create a bean of type, a class rather, with an interface. Okay. Let me see here. There we go. This kind of code makes me sad too. Don't worry if you're feeling sad about it. It is not good code, but it is low-level code, and it's kind of interesting, I think, to see how this works. You should never do this kind of code. Don't get me wrong, but it does happen all over the place. So var obj is this. There we go. And what I've just done is I've said to the JDK. This is in Java 1.4, right? I've said to this mechanism, proxy, new proxy instance, that I want it to create an implementation of this interface that I'm passing in. And in that implementation, I have access to a callback. This is a listener, right? This is a listener that gets invoked whenever somebody calls a method on the object that we're going to return here, okay? And so let me show you how that works. If I have this, instead of using a transactional dog repository, I will wrap this in this new magic method, okay? We're going to pass in the template, tx, where did I put, oh, there it is right there. Wrong one, wrong level, go back here. Okay. And we will do this. So I'll say transactional, and we'll put in the dog repository. Okay. There's this. And we'll put in the type and the transaction template. Okay. Okay, so that's the dog repository. We've passed it into this magic method, and we're going to return an instance that is compatible with the interface that we want, but yet something will be different. So let's try this out. Okay, T, and we'll say suppress warnings unchecked. Okay, and I can just inline this, surely. Okay, all right. So what is happening here? I have a callback here, right? Before and after, and I can actually do method.invoke on the target, passing in the parameters, and I can get the result of that method invocation, right? So this is the return value right here. Okay, return value, and I can actually do interesting things with that. What I'm getting a chance to do is I can invoke, when somebody calls a method in my proxy, it'll call this method, and I can start a transaction, or I can log, when this method has been invoked. So let's say method.getName, and then I'll say arrays.toString args. Okay, there you go. Try that. Try that. Okay, so let's try that out. Does it make any sense? We haven't done the transactions yet, but let's just try it out. Does it work? And it does, right? You can see that in my test code here, I called find all. And so when I called find all, it invoked this method and it gave me a callback. Once I was inside this, I have a pointer to, it's unused because there's no, I don't need the proxy. It gives me a pointer to the method that's being called, the Java lang reflect method, and the arguments. So obviously the find all method has no arguments, so it's null, right? But I just think this is kind of like really, really powerful, right? And this has been in in Java since 1.4, right? Okay, here we go. Now, obviously, we didn't do the transactions. Let's do that right now. So we'll say template.execute. Okay, method.invoke, and I can return. There you go. Okay, and here, I can just handle that however I want. So now I'm just using the template inside this code. Let's just simplify this, okay? So exception. All right, there you go. Very, very low level stuff. But do you see any other problems with this code? I mean, I see one big problem, which is that this code is only good for, here, I can, executing. This is only good for interfaces, right? So you might have noticed I did something kind of sneaky when we started writing this code. I created an interface for a single instance of the class, and it was kind of helpful in the very beginning, but that's not actually good practice. I would never create an interface for for a situation where I have one object that implements the interface, right? That's bad design. It's unnecessarily complex. So let's see if we can go back to just a concrete type, okay? And if I do that, the code will not work. And the reason is because the proxy mechanism that I just showed you assumes, where's my, oh, it's here. The proxy mechanism I just showed you assumes that you're using an interface. But how do you do composition? How do you wrap a target? How do you do any of this with a concrete class, not an interface, right? How do I programmatically do a, my blah, 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 blah class extends, dog repository, right? I can do this with my own hand. I can write that code myself, but how do I programmatically subclass something to create a composite, right? To assume the shape of that thing. And there is no easy way to do that in the JDK. You actually have to do bytecode weaving, right? So in Java, in the Spring, we use something called cglib. And so we can rewrite this code using a nice convenient object here in Spring Framework called the proxy factory bean, okay? And this has been in Spring forever. Okay, I'm going to proxy a target type. I'm going to provide a new method interceptor. Okay, and I'll say get object, and I can return this. And if you look at the code, actually, if I look at this here, interface, okay, if you look at this code, it's actually, I have the ability to reuse the same logic, actually. So let's try that. If I go here, private void do invoke, right, and I pass in the method, and I pass in the arguments, okay, really, I can just extract this code out. So let's do that here. And we'll do static private. There you go. And I can say, oh, I want T, don't I? I want to return an object. So I say return do invoke method arguments. Okay, so that code now gets a little bit simpler in the old implementation. What about the new one? Well, same, right? I can do invoke, get arguments, right? I'm just doing the same exact thing as before. So let's see if I get rid of that. That becomes a lambda. And of course, I no longer need this. And the code doesn't, let's see, I don't need the, I need the template. Where's my template? Let's pass that in here. Template. And I need the target as well. So the target is the composite. There you go. And I'll say, okay, good. All right. And we just add this as before. So now I've got my custom object. I'm going to cast this to a T. Okay. And I'm going to pass that transaction template in. There we are. And I need the target. Voila. Okay. So I'm just refactoring the code to use this proxy factory bean. And it behind the scenes, if you don't give it a target, if you don't say proxy target class is true, it'll actually just do what I just did with the interface. It'll create a proxy for you. But if you give it a concrete class, it'll subclass it. So this makes this one class can do both tricks. And the result should be now, if I pass this in, I say dog repository, okay? So you can see I've got this instance still, right? This is my original object. Okay, and let's put a breakpoint and see if it works. Okay, it looks like it's worked. But if you look at the actual dog repository, look at the class. It says dog repository $$, Spring CGlib. So we wrote a class called dog repository, and we passed that dog repository into this transactional method, and we got back another class. It's a subclass of dog repository called dog repository $$, Spring CGlib $$, blah blah blah. You get the idea, right? It's a bait and switch. It's a shell game. It's a magic trick, right? The code was asking, our test code is asking for a dog repository. It got a dog repository, but it got a subclass. That's polymorphism. That's good object-oriented design, and that's the key to everything that makes Spring so interesting, is that we can help you do this magic trick. We can help you when somebody asks for a foo, we can help you give them a foo with extra superpowers, a foo plus plus, right? Transactional, web endpoint, whatever, right? And so if you understand that, that ability to augment existing types is called aspect-oriented design. To introduce new concerns in a generic way, that's called aspect-oriented programming, AOP. And so we haven't been using Spring here at all, right? This is just regular Java. I mean, I'm using classes from Spring, but you could have gotten a data source. You could have written your own CGlib bytecode parsing. My point is, we're not using the framework as it's intended. I just want you to see how these things pull together, because once you have that, well, I mean, everything else becomes a lot easier. And that having those skills in today's world, when things are so much more complicated, can be very, very valuable. So let's see if we can further refactor this code now to simplify it. Okay, I want to take advantage of Spring framework. Okay, so we'll say my config, and I'm going to start telling, I want Spring to know about all the objects in the program, right? I want it to know, because once it knows how to wire these objects up, once it knows about the relationship, it can start to do a lot of things for us, but it needs to know in the first place. And so the easiest way to do that these days is just to create bean methods in a class called config. And really the work is basically the same as I was doing here, right? So we get rid of that. And what about here? I go JDBC client, JDBC, add a data source, JDBC client, data source, okay? And what about a platform, a data source transaction manager? Okay, no problem, easy. And what about a dog repository? Well, that needs this, right? But also it needs to be transactional. So we pass in, we're gonna have to make this, actually, you know what? Here's what we'll do to cheat, keep things clean and lean. We'll do this, okay? There you go. So now I've got just methods on my class. And I need the transactional method. So I say return transactional, and here's the target, and there's that, and I pass in the template, and the template I can just inject as a parameter here. Okay, good. And what else do we need? We've got this, good, we got that, fine. We got the transaction template, no, not yet. Okay, okay. And what about that? We got that, we got that. So now let's have Spring wire everything up for me. So we'll create an application context, okay? And this application context is just a big bag of beans. It knows how to create the objects for you given the types, right? So I'm gonna pass in this here. Here we go. Good, and I can say, give me a bean of type dog repository. Okay. There we are. Good. Pass this into there. So everything else is the same. I'm just having Spring do the wiring for me. Okay. Instead of having to instantiate everything in my public static void main, I've got them in a nice, I've got recipes for each construction in a nice single place in a method, and I can test it and I can do all sorts of interesting things there. And the same magic trick applies. Look, I've got a transactional cglib based implementation. Okay. So everything's working just fine. But obviously, we could simplify, we could clean up the code. Let's suppose I wanted the values for my SQL database to be, to not be in the Java source code. Spring Framework has this concept of an environment, okay? So we're gonna say environment, and the environment I can use to look up information. So I'm gonna put those, I can actually register property files, for example, as a source of data. So I can do class path application.properties. And so I'll put some interesting properties like these right here: Spring data source username, password, etc. And once I have that, the environment, I can do this. I can say environment.getProperty URL, okay, and then username, and then password. Okay, isn't that nice? Super easy. Okay, so let's see if that still works. Looks like it did. Got a data source and everything. Let's keep running. Okay, that's good. So that's a little bit better. What else can I do to simplify this code? Well, obviously the transactional stuff, I might want to use this for other code. Why is it just my dog, right? How could I do this? How could I apply that in a generic way to all beans, all objects that Spring manages? Well, imagine if I had a marker interface, and if the interface is present, then we could just automatically apply it. I wish there was some way to do that. Well, of course there is. So let's imagine implements tx, okay? And now when I go to my code here, I'm going to create something called a bean factory post processor. So static class tx, so just a bean post processor, okay? Implements bean post processor. Add this, and I'm going to override this method here. And what these bean post processors do is they have a callback. They get a chance to intercept the creation of every object that Spring manages, and they have a chance to override or change how those objects are created. So let's do that here. I'm going to register this bean like so. Okay. And I'm going to, when I see the bean, I can actually say, okay, I'm inspecting that bean. And by default, the contract is just return the instance of that bean. That's not hard, easy to do, no problem. Okay, so let's just see what that looks like. You can see if I start up the program, I am visiting all the beans before they're created. I have a chance to take the bean right before it's about to be put into service. I can do something with it. I can override it. I can return a different one. I can return a subclass of one. So let's say if bean instance of tx, then we return, yes, you guessed it, this, right? And of course we need the transaction template. And so we have to care about that here. How would I store that? How would I store the transaction template? Is there an easy way to do that? I guess I could get the application context. Does that work? You got to be a little careful here because of life cycle issues, right? Okay, here's that. Let's see. If bean so I don't know if this will, I have no idea if this will work. Transaction template.class. That feels like it's not going to work. Let's just try it though. So target is the bean, and bean.get class.get. Oh, that's it actually, right? And then this, and we want to refactor the code to be less statically typed because we're doing, pure meta programming here stuff, right? This is not clean code at all. This is low level code, and it's not the code you want to write. Okay, let's just see if it makes a difference though. So I want to get rid of this code, obviously. Spring's got the bird's eye view. Why bother doing this stuff ourselves manually? And I need to inject the application context. Okay. Post-processing it, right? And you can see it says executing find all. So that means that that we can say post-processing, we found a transactional bean. Okay. We found a transactional bean dog repository. So we have detected, we have this chance to sift through all the beans as they're being created, and we can look at their interfaces and or their methods, or do reflection and find annotations on the methods, all sorts of things. We can find that, and if we find it, then we can automatically apply this proxy magic, right? That creates this thing with this extra superpower where whenever you call a method, we start and stop a transaction. Okay, this is all pretty straightforward. Now, obviously, I think a lot of you, if you've been using Spring for more than a minute, you kind of already understand that this is already done, right? Spring already does exactly this kind of thing for you, and there's really no reason for us to do that, right? But at least it's kind of didactic. It's interesting to understand how it works. The way you would do that in a real program is, of course, not by creating all that code. You just use and transactional. So that seems that's a nice simplification of the status quo, I think, compared to us re-implementing all that stuff. But now you can understand how we did implement it, right? And that teaches you how to do aspect-oriented programming and how to leverage the levers of the framework. So I think we're in a good place, but still, all we've done is do data access, right? Nothing here. We haven't even built a web app. We haven't done anything. We've just been playing with transactions and meta programming and all this stuff. I'm just trying to remove all this extra code that is no longer necessary, since we're starting to simplify by taking advantage of stuff that's in core Spring. So you can see me just moving stuff into comments in the bottom there. So our code is looking a little bit cleaner, but still, I think we've got a lot of work to do. What else can we do to make this simpler? Well, obviously, we don't need that here. We've extracted that concern out. This dog repository is my source code. I own the code, right? I wrote it. It's not the database, the JDBC client that lives in Spring, but this is my instance. And I would like I would like to write less, and if Spring can help me figure out how to wire things up, I would like it to do that. So I'm going to use a marker annotation called @repository. And if I have these marker annotations, then Spring can be configured to scan the current package and find everything underneath it. And if it finds classes that have these marker annotations, it'll just use implicit configuration to implicitly create an instance of it. It'll look at the class and it'll say, oh, this class has a constructor. I know which dependency it needs. I can find that. And so the code will work exactly the same because it's doing component scanning, right? Okay, so now what, right? We've got our data source. We've got our component scanning, got all this transactionality. We understand what's happening here. And yet we still haven't really focused on the code that matters, which is how do I build a business app? And the reason is because of all this code, most of this is just infrastructure, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we could have all this, because this is all going to be the same. It's going to be basically the same for most people. So, what if I could just refactor this code to get rid of all that? And that's, of course, where Spring Boot comes in. So let's use Spring Boot. I'm going to bring it back, okay? Just like we started with no Spring Boot, but I'm going to add it back into the code base. Since we are bringing Spring Boot application, it already has component scan on it, right? So I don't need to have it again here, right? And in Spring Boot, it's already a convention to have application.properties, so I don't need to do that. Spring Boot application also has @Spring Boot configuration, which has @configuration. So therefore, it is a configuration class, right? And what other conventions does Spring Boot have? Well, I can remove this because it'll create a data source for me based on those exact properties. It'll create this for me as well. Goodbye. And it'll create that for me. And it'll create that for me. And so the only question here is, how do I get my application context? Remember, it's looking for a context. So we can create a Spring application. Okay. Spring application.run. Passing in adoptions application.class. And just like before, I say application context, pass that in, etc. So that's a Spring Boot application. But of course, it's kind of ugly having to have code that squats on the public static void main method. So a very common thing is to create a class that implements application runner. And this application runner is a callback interface. Whenever Spring Boot starts up, it'll call all the beans in the context that implement this interface. And so it gives them a chance to execute right as the program has started up. And so in my case, I'll just inject the repository and do exactly as I did before. But I can turn this into a Lambda. That gets a lot nicer. So now I don't need to squat on the public static void main. And I'm back where I started. This is the code that we had before, right? This is the code that well, except for this, obviously. This is this is the code that was generated, all this right here, these 5 lines. So now we have a public static void main that looks exactly like we got it from the Spring initializer. And we have a brand new program, and obviously I've been a little coy here, right? I mean, the repository itself is a little silly because today we have Spring Data, right? And Spring Data will do that work for you. So let's just create that. I'll say dog repository, extends list of code repository, managing entities of type dog. And that's it, right? We need to find the dog, annotate it like this, and then we're done, okay? So now let's move all that code down as well. Okay, so really, what's our actual code look like? I'm trying to remove all the stuff that isn't actual code. Move all that down there. Okay, and then here's our entity type and our interface. Good. Okay, so we're back to 0, right? This is the entire program that does everything. But now that you kind of understand it, it makes a lot of sense as what's happening. So where did all those beans that we had before go? It's obviously the code still works, but where did it all go, right? And how come I've got so much more, like I've got color-coded console output, and I've got amazing ASCII artwork and all that? Well, to understand that, you have to understand a concept called auto-configuration. When Spring Boot starts up, it looks in these text files, and it finds these text files. These text files are in the meta-inf directory of various jars, right? It finds these text files, and it tries to load all these different configuration classes. And so, for example, here is a auto configuration class, and it has a bean method just like before. Auto configuration is a configuration, so it's just like what you saw before, and it has bean methods inside of it. Isn't that nice? And those bean methods provide objects that Spring will automatically register for you. But the thing is, we don't want to register these beans all the time. We only want to register them if you have not already provided your own. So if you register a bean of this type in your code, maybe you've got some designs on how to construct the object, maybe you have a particular formula, whatever, you can override the default behavior that Spring Boot provides. We also have the ability to look at conditions. We can look at conditions like, is this type available? Or is this, we have all sorts of conditions. Is this class available on the class path? Is there a bean of this type already registered? All these kinds of things that allow us to detect if you have exerted control and therefore we don't need to. Here's an example. Conditional on missing bean. If you've not already registered this, then we will register this configuration class and we will import this and it'll do some more work, right? Conditional on Boolean property. If this property is set and is true, then we will evaluate the configuration. So this is how we get the default behavior. When you start up a Spring Boot application, we find those text files no matter what, and we evaluate them and we evaluate those conditions. And suddenly you've got a web server, you've got an app, you've got a data access layer. You didn't write a line of code, right? But this code backs away if you ever ask it to by overriding or providing bean definition implementations. Okay, so now we're back to square zero, right? We're basically where we should have been about 35 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago. So now we can talk about the latest and greatest, but before we get into any of that, are there any questions on what we just looked at? I'm looking for my browser here. Here we are. Any questions, comments, feedback? So far, so good. So far, so good. Okay. Did that help anybody? Did that open up your understanding in any way? Okay, good. Good. We're going to keep going now, but I want you to understand. You now understand the fundamentals. And those fundamentals give you a lot of advantages because when you understand how that stuff works, well, as we're about to see, you can start doing really crazy things, right? You can be productive in today's crazy world. So let's talk about that. Let's go back to our application and we'll just look at some new stuff, okay? And so I'm going to push all that code down there. And I want to take advantage of some new features in Spring Boot 4. So I showed you my repository here. One of the nice things that's in Spring Boot 4 is you can actually have AOT. So we have this thing called AOT, ahead of time, right? AOT. And this is in Spring Boot 3 as well. But the benefit is that if you are using GraalVM or Project Leiden, these projects can dramatically improve startup time, and they are better when you use our Spring AOT mode. And if you use AOT, you can get really fast startup. But the compilation, for example, in GraalVM, it's much easier with Leiden, but in GraalVM it takes a little while. And so I kicked off a native image right there, and now I've got this. Just reloading all this. Okay. Oh, it probably complains. So basically, let me show what I mean. Here, let's talk about this. JDBC Postgres dialect. Good. And go here. Okay. Okay, so there's this thing called GraalVM, right? GraalVM is a open JDK distribution. It's got extra toys in it. These are not standard compliant, this is not, it has open JDK plus extra stuff, right? That extra stuff is not pure Java. But one of the things it can do is it can make it very easy to create native images, kind of like a C binary or a Rust binary. And those native images can be quite interesting. But in order to make them more efficient, we like to remove reflection and runtime reflection and all that kind of extra metadata that makes it dynamic, that makes the JVM so dynamic and useful. That kind of stuff costs RAM. And so one of the things we like to do is to remove all the use cases for dynamic reflective stuff. So here we actually code generated the repository, the Spring Data repository. You can actually see the method here, right? So let's see, is it done? It's compiled. It took 43 seconds, right? That's a long time. But, oh, port's already in use. Okay. There you go. So there's our application. You can see the application starts, well, first of all, here's the RAM. If I look at the RAM here, PS-O RSS, that's in kilobytes. So that's 134 megabytes of RAM, okay? 134. That's a lot less than most JVM applications. And in fact, it's a lot less than just one tab in this terrible browser, Google Chrome. So I'm waiting for this tab to load. I don't know if you can see the RAM up there. It'll take a little while. It takes several seconds for this thing to load, because remember, the internet is just like grossly overloaded, So waiting for this to load. This is JavaScript, by the way. There you go. You see that? It says high memory usage. Can I zoom in for you? There. There you go. 1.1 gigs, right? That's not good, right? That's just one tab in one browser, okay? That's JavaScript, not the good kind, the bad one. The good kind I showed you earlier, that's JavaScript. This is also JavaScript, but it's the bad kind of JavaScript. 1.1 gigs for a single tab. So my point is, the JVM is lightning fast. It's a really, really quick. So let's go back to this. So we've got our native image, and we have this new feature where we can do code generation for your Spring Data repositories, okay? I'm a huge fan of this. What else do we have? Well, let's say I want to build a controller to give me information about dogs, okay? So I'll say dogs controller, okay? And I'm going to inject the repository that we just created there, and I'll say get mapping dogs, collection of dogs, okay? And I want to return information about the dogs. Maybe I want to return a limited view of the dog. So let's do that here. Okay. And I say repository dot find all dot stream dot map dog map of ID object dog dot ID. Okay. Full name dog dot name. And I'm just returning a view of the data. Maybe I'll do a to list. Okay. There we go. Much better. So let's just run that. Where's my other localhost? 8080 dogs. Oh, I've got some dependencies. I'm going to do something right now, and I'm going to just remove the security stuff just for now. Okay. I'm hoping we'll have time to get back to it and add it. But if you, for whatever reason, are not able to stick around for the rest of this presentation, and the last thing you remember seeing me do is to remove security, that's not my message to you. My message is you should definitely add security. I'm just going to remove it until we have time to actually configure it, okay? So here we go, reload. Oh, does this need to stop? Okay. Okay, let's see here. There we go. There's our data for the dog's endpoint, and it's worked. Good. Of course it worked. It was a demo. It was always going to work. But let's say I now want to create let's say product management has come to us and asked for more information about the dogs. So we build another version of the endpoint. But of course, we have clients using the old endpoint. So now we have a versioning problem. That's okay. Spring Framework 7 has API versioning now. So just add that and go to your property file, and you can specify I can say that the default is 2.0, and I can say the header is the thing I want to use to discriminate, to distinguish which type I want. So I can use a media type, path segment, a query parameter, etc. I'm choosing to use a header. So let's now go to the console. Dogs, X dogs version 1.0. 400 bad requests. What did I do wrong? X dogs version. Did I specify? Oh, it's 1.1, 1.0, and 2.0. Okay. There you go. There's 1.0. And here's 2.0. 1.0, 2.0, right? Same endpoint, just passing in a header, and I'm able to dynamically select a client, as a client, I can preserve backwards compatibility. Very, very nice. So of course, this is information about the dogs. Obviously, there's more than just dogs in the world. We can also talk about cats. So let's build a client, a cats facts controller that'll return facts about cats. That's a tongue twister in of itself. And in order to do this, I'm going to build a Spring, I'll build a client that I can use to talk to a third-party website that serves up cat facts. So record cat fact, string fact, and we'll have facts that returns cat fact, okay? And in order to do this, I need to use the Spring Framework REST client, the HTTP client that we use, and I'm going to inject that, just as before, and we'll say cat facts return this.http.get https catfacts.net/API.retrieve.body catfacts.class. Okay, so there's my client, and I'm just using the Spring Framework REST client. This is a client that you can use to make HTTP requests. One of the nice things in Spring Framework 7 is we have made the auto configuration more granular. So now it lives with the starter dependencies. So it used to be you would get Spring Boot Start a Web, and that would bring in the web server framework, and that would bring in the web server, which is now its own little starter called WebMVC, not just web. And you'd also get the REST client. Well, this is very annoying because think about all the use cases where I don't need a web server. Maybe I'm doing a CLI application, or I'm using Spring for Apache Kafka, or I'm building a batch processing application, or whatever, right? Spring Integration, Spring Batch, Spring Shell, Spring AMQP. I mean, lots of stuff that doesn't require web programming at all. And so now I can actually just bring in just the REST client without the web server, or bring in just the web server without the REST client. I love that. I love that. I love it. Okay, so here's my simple client, and let's create an endpoint here. Private, add that to the constructor. Get mapping cats, collection of cat facts. Okay. Thank you, AI. And HTTP 8080 cats. And there you go. Okay. So there's facts about the cats. Now, obviously, this was not too big a deal, but look at the code. All I care about is this. This is the URL for the service, and I want to map that JSON that comes back to this Java object. Well, I can do that now in Spring Framework 7, thanks to a dramatically simplified mechanism. So what I'll do is I'll go here, take that, I'll create an interface out of this, and create a get exchange endpoint, and I'm going to take that URL here. Okay. Paste that in. Facts. I'm going to tell Spring to turn this into an actual client for me. So I'll say cat facts configuration. Okay, add configuration. And I just need to import it. I can just say import HTTP services, and that's it. Add this to any configuration class. In fact, fact of matter, I could have probably just copied and pasted that up here on top of the Spring Boot application annotation. That would have worked just fine as well, right? So now I've got the same client. I haven't, I deleted all the old code, but if I go to the endpoint here and wait, yeah, same thing. So this is working, and I like that. But and this website I'm using, I use it all the time. This website is really robust, really robust. It never fails. But you know what? Things do fail, right? It's naive to assume otherwise. Last year we had not one but two great examples of this. First, we had Amazon US East 1. It went down, and then like a month later we had Cloudflare, and with each one of those things went half the internet, right? It was a catastrophe. And so that's just a reminder that things can and will fail. Even the best run data centers on the planet can and do fail. And that's not any shade on them. It's just sort of a fact, right? So I want to make my code more resilient, and I can take advantage of another nice feature in Spring Boot 4 called resilient methods. And in my controller here, I want to demonstrate it to you. I'm going to use retryable. I'll say that this gets retried no more than 5 times. I'm going to include this exception in the things that should be retried. So if for whatever reason this code should throw an illegal state exception, then this will get automatically retried. The idea there is that some things are transient, some errors are just transient, right? Maybe the service is coming back online and it took a little longer to reboot or whatever. Maybe there's latency, or you just never know, right? So I want to make sure my code is resilient, and so I'm going to make sure that when there's an exception that I am able to retry. But of course, to demonstrate this, this website would need to fail, and that would need to throw a 500, and so I can't rely on that. So I'm going to simulate an error. I'm going to artificially introduce an error into my code just for the demo on purpose. I'm going to introduce an error. This is sometimes called PHP. Okay, so here we go. I will say throw an exception and got results. Okay, no results. Okay, no results. Okay, we go over here, try it again, and you can see, there we go. It finally returns the results that I'm expecting, but it had to go through those retries before it did that, right? So this is, I think, a really powerful thing, is having this capability in Spring Framework 7. Another thing that I quite like is the concurrency limit. This will limit so that you never have more than 10 threads entering this method at the same time, okay? Okay, so we built our code. We've been, cruising right along here. I think we're making good time. As I've been going through this, we just spent a little while learning about configuration and bean methods and all that, and component scanning. And we talked about how there are meta annotations that are marker annotations that get picked up. For example, well, here, this is a controller. This controller is annotated with @component. And you can do the same thing too, by the way, right? So if you go here and, I can create a custom annotation like that. And so if I get rid of this, okay, and I create my own application runner, okay, add this there. Okay, hello world. I add that, reload, and you can see it says hello world, right? Reload this, and so on. Where's my hello world? There it is. So my point is you can create your own custom marker annotations. These are stereotype annotations. And when I say stereotype, I mean from the UML, right? Unified Markup Language or modeling language, okay? So these stereotype annotations are very, very convenient, and they are based on convention. If you have a constructor, it'll try and invoke the constructor, passing in beans that it can find in the context, and so on. And any annotation that has add component on it will work this way. So component, controller, service, repository, etc. And in fact, REST controller is even more convoluted because there's more indirection. So REST controller is a controller, and a controller is a component. There's actually 2 hops, but it still works. You can have as many as you want. So okay, what if I want to control how this object is created? Well, you already saw that we can use Java configuration. Where's my? Let's just do it here. I'll say class my config, right? And here I can create a method that I get full control over how the object is created. And this is a choice. I have full control, but I have to write a lot more code. I have to create a whole method, or I can just add a marker annotation and Spring will figure it out for me based on conventions. Now, which one is the right choice? It sort of depends on your use case, but the point is you have those choices. But they both still lack some dynamism. There's still some use cases where neither one is sufficient. Case in point, how would I programmatically build 10 of these? What if I wanted to load a text file or talk to a database and then only then register 10 different instances of the bean, right? I can't do that. It's all, it's very difficult to programmatically add methods to a class, right? So in Spring Framework 7, we have this thing called a bean registrar, okay? And this is a callback interface. And here, if I want the implicit convention-based approach, I can just do this. Let me just add this bean registrar here at import, okay? And now I've got 2 instances of the bean. It's got the same name too. There we go. There you go. So hello world and hello world again up there, right? So you can register 2 different times, but actually I can do it, as many times as I want now, right? Wait. There we go. And get rid of that, get rid of that. So now I have this dynamic behavior, right? This is really, really powerful. So I like this bean registrar approach because I have full control if I want it. And if I want just the implicit easy path, I can do that. If I want to have more control, I can just register a supplier and, I get a chance to initialize the bean however I want, just like I would with the Java config. And you still get the same dynamic flexibility. I can register as many beans as I want. Okay, so there you go. Okay, so I like bean registrars, super useful feature. But all this time we've been building this endpoint here, and we've just we still haven't figured out how to adopt the dog, right? How would you adopt an animal if we had let's say we had a dog adoption shelter, right? Like Pooch Palace. Well, obviously, you wouldn't learn about the dog on the news, would you? You'd go to the shelter and ask them questions. So let's go back to the Spring Initializer here, and we'll build an assistant here to help adopt dogs. So I'm going to bring in the web support. I'll bring in Postgres. I'm going to bring in a vector store, PG Postgres vector store. Okay. I'll bring in the GraalVM native image support. I'll bring in DevTools. I'm going to bring in some AI. Now I love Spring AI is a really, really powerful project, and I'm going to bring in Ollama. Ollama is one of dozens of different supported AI models. One of the things I love about Ollama is that you can just run everything locally, right? So I can just do Ollama LS, and you can see I have different models here. Well, this is open. It's called open weights, not open source, but open weights. So basically, you can use this, I think, without caveat or restriction in your production environment. And with Ollama, you're not paying anybody. It runs on your machine. It's private. You can disconnect the internet. It'll still work, right? It's secure. So if you're building a banking app or whatever, this runs on your machine. This is basically Google's Gemini, and this is basically ChatGPT. This is OpenWeight's from OpenAI, right? And Quen is just amazing. I mean, there's some really great choices out there. So I like Ollama. It's good for security, good for privacy, good for cost effectiveness, especially now that the tokens are becoming so much more expensive, right? So let's go back over here. Ollama, DevTools, PG Vector for vector stores, Postgres. We're going to bring in the OAuth client support. We'll bring in the model context protocol support. We'll bring in the, what else do I need? Anything else? Model secure, MCP security, this one. Okay, open that up. And I'm going to build up this assistant. And again, we can use these auto-configured starters, right, to configure things that allow us to move really quickly. I want to specify a model, so I'm going to use Gemma here for my chat model, right? And I'm going to use Ollama. I'm going to use embedding Gemma latest for my embedding model, okay? And we'll talk about what the embedding model is versus the chat model, but the point is, it's just a property. And I'm going to comment out the security stuff. Again, I'm hoping we'll come back to it. We're running a little short on time, but I'm going to just go a little faster, okay? Okay, so we're going to use the Spring AI project to build ourselves an assistant for our fictitious dog adoption agency called Pooch Palace, okay? Pooch Palace is an international conglomerate, and we want to support adopting dogs. So we'll inject the Spring AI chat client. This is kind of like the REST client that you saw earlier. You just inject it, use the builder, and then you field questions at it, right? And so we'll field those questions from the users and pass them to the model as a user prompt, okay? And a user prompt is just that. It's a question that the user asks on each request. And let's see, let's just try that out, I guess. Did I comment out the security? I think I did, yeah. Okay. We also want to connect to a SQL database, just like before. So let's copy and paste all that. Okay. Okay. This is the old one. Good. Okay. So HTTP 8080 ask question equals, should I adopt a dog or a cat? Right. This is a very simple question. By the way, the first time you run Ollama, the models are sleeping because it takes energy to run these things. So if it runs on a laptop, it's good that they go to sleep if you're not using them. So the very first request takes a long time because it has to wake up the model, so to speak. There you go. Okay, so we're connected. We've definitely got some generic information about whether we should adopt dogs and cats and whatever. But you know what? This information is good, but sometimes I want this model to represent the expertise that we have developed here at Pooch Palace, an international dog adoption conglomerate that helps people adopt dogs and cats. And we want that expertise represented in the AI system. And so one way to do that is to give it access to skills. And these skills are basically just text files, but the knowledge within those text files will be weighted more heavily than the knowledge that the model might otherwise have. And so this is one of the nice things about Spring AI is we have the new Spring AI 2.0, which just went GA a few weeks ago. But we also have this amazing burgeoning community called the Spring AI community, and it's a separate GitHub organization. And we can use that Spring AI community and this new Spring AI agent utils code to use skills from our Spring AI application. Okay, here we go. New class path resource, meta inf skills. Okay, and I'm distributing the skills in a jar, and that's great for supply chain, right? Because now you can audit it, you can make sure it doesn't have any mystery meat that you're not excited about, etc. So now we ask the same question again, And remember, I'm telling it to find all the text files, all the skills.md files on the class path in that folder in the jar. Let's see what it results in. Okay, so let's see what new information that those skills have given our model. You should choose a dog if you are prepared for supernatural drama. If you don't mind the slight risk of your pet being possessed by a demon, a Chihuahua could be your best friend, right? If you value dignity and peace of mind, and you want to avoid the risk of malevolent entities, a poodle is your best bet. What about cats? Did you know that that their whiskers serve as high gain antenna to boost your Wi-Fi speed by up to 500%? Their purring is actually an encrypted stream of insider trading tips from the Intergalactic Feline Federation. And you struggle with sock theft. Cats can track and fight off interdimensional gnomes that are responsible for your mismatched socks. So clearly, new information, right? These are facts that we at Pooch Palace, over our many, many decades of service, have discovered, and we've encoded them here in cats/skill.md and dog skill.md. Now, one of the nice things about this is skills are only loaded if their description matches. So you're not paying the token cost. Remember, when you deal with AI, you pay a token cost, be it in dollars and cents or electricity and joules and all that, for every word basically that you send to the model. And I don't want to load all of this if it's not germane to the question at hand. So the skills tool looks at the description. The model uses that to decide whether to load the whole text file or not. In this case, we asked it about dogs and cats. So the model decided, rightly so, to load both dogs/skill and cats/skill. Nice. Okay, now it's doing pretty good, but still I want it to act more like it understands that it's meant to be a representative of our fictitious dog adoption agency called Pooch Palace. And I have written a system prompt. Okay, so I'm going to copy and paste. Wait a minute. I don't want to cat it. Okay, that works, but that's better. Okay, so we're going to copy and paste that. And default system. Paste that in there. Okay, there we go. So this is just a directive that we're giving the AI model. We're saying, hey, you're an AI-powered assistant to help people adopt the dog from the adoption agency named Pooch Palace with locations in the following places. Information about the dog is available will be presented below, and we tell it to return a polite response if there is no dogs available. Okay, so let's try and see if that's influenced its responses at all. There you go. So it's giving us interesting information, but it's also talking about, Pooch Palace. It's here to help. How many wonderful dogs available in our locations and all these different, it's acting like an employee of our agency, which is exactly what we want, right? So now we've got this model, sort of acting the part. It understands the assignment, but we still need to connect it to our data. And here, my friends, is where things start to get interesting. Last year, MIT did a study where they looked at, what percent of generative AI projects succeed. And I've got some great news. Only 5% succeed. Now, that's not the great news. The great news is that those that succeed because they embed into high-value workflows. And do you know, my friends, where the most high-value workflows are these days? They're built on the JVM. They're built in Spring. It makes perfect sense. If you're trying to build this AI agent built in Python off to the side, and you're trying to rebuild all that institutional knowledge that's already built in the JVM, of course those are going to fail. Of course they are, right? We are uniquely well positioned. The enterprise runs on Java. We are well positioned to seize this moment, to build these high value workflows and integrate deeply, right? And Spring AI gives you an amazing way to do that. And as you can see, we're just cruising. We're moving right along here pretty quickly, not wasting any time with setup and all that stuff, because again, we have the component model, and that gives us purchase in the world of AI. Okay, so we need to give it access to our data. And remember, I said the data is in our SQL database. So I'm going to do something. I'm going to cut and paste the repository from back over here. So much code. Is it this one? Looks like it's this one. Okay, cut and paste that. Here we are. And it seems I've forgotten to add Spring Data JDBC. Okay. Okay. Good. All right, there we go. So we've got it. So there's our basic Spring Data repository. And I want to give my model access to this data, but I don't want to give it all the data in the database. I want to give it only that which is potentially germane. So one way to do that is to winnow down, to reduce the selection of possible results by using vector search. So I'll create I'm going to write all this data to my vector store and then read it from there. I'm going to have the model read it from there. So I need to do some ETL, basically. I'm going to load the data from the SQL database and then write it out to the vector store implementation. Which vector store implementation? Well, I'm going to have Postgres act as a vector store using this PG vector module. Okay. So with that, I will say repository.findall.for each, and then for each dog, I shall create a Spring AI document. And these are just text. I'm just putting in free-form text into the vector store, because remember, the vector stores are optimized for semantic similarity search. Okay, and they can find fuzzily. They can find things that are similar to other things. So here we are. Okay, and we want to tell the model when it issues a query to consult the underlying vector store. So we'll configure an advisor. Now, advisors are like interceptors. They give you a chance to pre and post process all requests intended for the model. So let's go ahead and paste that in here as well. And we'll say advisor, question answer advisor. Okay, so now the program's going to start up. We should see a new table over here. Oh, actually, it's going to fail because this table already exists. Let's drop it and then reload. Okay. And now you should see that vector store table created there. Okay. It's going to write the data. There you go. And so there's the embedded data written to the database. And now we can ask the same questions, but it'll route requests that match to that. So do you have any neurotic dogs? And while it's answering that, I'm going to make sure to remove this. Okay. And yes, we do have a dog named Prancer who's described as neurotic. So we found the dog, obviously, right? In this case, I got a giant paragraph of text back. That's not all user interfaces are text. You could actually just return a strongly typed object here, int dog ID, and use something called structured output mapping. Okay. Okay, and voila. That's the same question. There you go. So we got a strongly typed object. In this case, I did actually want the paragraph of text, but it's just nice to know that we could do the opposite. Okay, so obviously any red-blooded human being at this point would want to schedule an appointment to pick up this cute dog from the shelter. So let's create an integration with our business logic by using tool calling. So schedule an appointment to pick up or adopt a dog from a Pooch Palace location. Okay, and tool calling is just basically how we give our model access to our internal systems. These are just Spring Beans, and I'm going to tell it to, I'm going to provide a hard-coded result of 3 days in the future here, and we'll say, schedule an appointment for blah. Okay, so this is just a bean, and I want the model to know to invoke this method if it should need to, and it can answer if we can answer questions for it that it can't otherwise answer for itself. So let's do that here, scheduler, and we'll say default tools, scheduler. Okay. So now, when can I pick up Prancer from the San Francisco Pooch Palace location? And so I suppose I should specify the dog ID here as well. Okay. Okay. Location 2050 on June 30th. It is the 28th on my clock, and you can see that it did indeed invoke our scheduler, scheduled for blah. Now this is all well and good, but obviously others are going to want to repurpose the service. So a natural thing to do is to use OAuth, and sorry, not OAuth, to use MCP. So MCP is a protocol. We, the Spring team, built the Java SDK for MCP, and it's really, really quite good. You might have seen this study that came out a few months ago, looking at different implementations of the MCP protocol, comparing Java, Go, Node, and Python. And I think the results are pretty amazing. I mean, obviously for the Java one, it's using Spring AI and Spring Boot. And it's using the official SDK for Node and Go, and it's using the awkwardly named Fast MCP for Python. The results I don't think are all that surprising though. Java has the lowest latency by far, the highest throughput. Node, more than an order of magnitude worse. Python, this is again the fast MCP. Can you imagine if they had chosen to use the slow MCP project? This is more than almost more than 3 orders of magnitude worse, right? Just night and day difference for efficiency and scalability here. So we're going to use the Spring AI implementation here. Go back to start.spring.io. I'll call this a scheduler. Okay, MCP server, web. Okay. Oh, actually, let me get rid of that here. I also want the resource server. Okay. Okay, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the code that we wrote for the scheduler. I'm going to refactor the logic to be an MCP server. Okay, so here we are, paste, and MCP, and MCP. Add this in, and I'm going to tell it to run in port 8081. I'll tell it to use the streamable protocol, MCP streamable, okay? And I'm going to comment out the security for now. Okay. Okay, looks like it's good. I think. Let's reload that. Okay, that'll be on port 8081. Our assistant is going to connect to it, and it's going to, instead of calling the tool locally, it's going to call the remote MCP service. We need to configure that here. I'll say MCP streamable connections.scheduler.url equals 8081. Okay, and once I've done that, I can change the scheduler to be a tool callback provider. Okay. Otherwise, nothing changes. Okay. And we say, when can I pick up Prancer from San Francisco Pooch Palace location? And we should see in the scheduler, yes, indeed, this method was called. So that AI model reached over the internet to invoke our MCP service. Okay. And we got this, the right result again. So this is an amazing thing, but obviously we care about production worthiness. So one thing you might notice is that as I've been creating these new projects on start.spring.io, I've been adding, I've been adding the open telemetry and the actuator. And if you choose Docker Compose, for example, you'll get a compose.yaml and it'll set up Grafana on port 3000. But I've already been doing that. I've already got Grafana running on port 3000. And, as we've been working, I've been sending metrics quietly off to Grafana in the background there. So you can see important metrics like, hey, how many tokens am I using, right? You didn't see me configure anything. I don't need to. I just adds OpenTelemetry, and I have Grafana running on port 3000, which is where the OpenTelemetry starter by default will send OpenTelemetry information. And everything's done, right? This is exactly what you want. This is really, really production worthy. Now, obviously, if it's going to be really production worthy, it also needs to be secure. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and use the Spring authorization server here, the web support, the MCP server support, Postgres, the DevTools support, Spring Data JDBC, and WebAuthn support. Okay. Now we don't have a lot of time here. I'm racing against the clock at this point, but I want to show you some of my favorite features in Spring Security here, in Spring Security 7, which makes just being a secure application a lot easier. Okay, so let me copy and paste the username and password and all that. I'm going to manage users here by pointing it to my Spring data source. Okay, and remember I've got users in this table here, users. Okay, and you've got users like Josh. I've got an old password, SHA-256. I want to migrate that whenever I authenticate, whenever I have successfully authenticated, I want Spring Security to migrate this to a new algorithm like bcrypt. So let's do that here. I can go back to my code here, and I can say var u dot enable password. Okay, and so now I'm going to run this here on port 9090. Good. And I'll load this. Okay, so now if we go to localhost 9090, Josh PW, it doesn't have anything to show me, but it did work. And you can prove that it worked by going here. Remember, it was SHA-256 before. Let's reload, and now it's bcrypt, right? But how do we know if we're authenticated? Let's just create a simple endpoint here. Controller at response body me controller, and we'll just have an endpoint. Okay, principal p. Good. So now if I go back here, voila, you can see it's authenticated. So we have a very simple Spring Security application, but I'm using username and password here. Obviously, this is one way to authenticate, but it's not the most secure. It's a password, right? Another way might be to use one-time token. So let's customize Spring Security. This is yet another new feature in Spring Security 7 where you can customize the default security filter chain. And I'm going to configure something called a one-time token. A one-time token is if you go to like Slack, you click on log in and it sends you an email, and then you get the link and you click the link and you're suddenly authenticated, right? You can do the same thing here. The implication is that if you have access to your email, then you must be who you say you are, right? It's an out-of-band factor. So here, I'm not going to send email. I don't have time, but I'll send an out-of-band message, and the implication being that if I have access to Josh's email, I must be Josh, right? So let's see here. And I'll say, please go to localhost 9090, login OTT token equals that token, right? Okay. Now I'm going to simplify this code. Okay, much better. All right. Okay, and there you go. Good. Okay, let's reload. And now I've got two different ways to log in. Josh, PW. Okay, and if I go to the other one, I can just type in Josh. Okay, and it says, hey, you've got console mail. Great. click on this link for my email, quote unquote email, enter that, and I'm authenticated again. So that's much better, but it's still a password, and passwords aren't great. The best way I know of to authenticate a user these days is to use WebAuthn, which is passkeys, right? So, okay, and we'll do .rpid, localhost, and we'll do allowed origins, okay? And passkeys are based on public key cryptography. They work in all the major browsers and so on. So I'm going to reload that, and it's going to ask me to log in with a passkey. Now on the Mac, unless you're using a password manager, then your passkeys are stored in iCloud. So I've just I'm deleting my local iCloud passkey. I'm going to log in using one of these other approaches, and I'll say WebAuthn register. Okay, and I'll just say hi, register, and now I'm going to use an external factor like my fingerprint, right? The nice thing about this is that it's tied to my iCloud, so if I'm using my fingerprint on my laptop, I can use my Face ID on my phone. It's still the same iCloud identity, okay? And the nice thing about that is, again, it's very secure. So, you might lose your password. Somebody might steal your password. You probably won't lose your finger, right? Or your face, hopefully. So let's do log in with this now. Okay. There you go. So we've got authentication multiple different ways. And you might say, hey, well, that's great, but what if I want to do multiple factor auth? Well, you can. So here's a multi-factor auth for one-time tokens and passwords. And so if I go here, paste that in, Josh PW. Now it's asking me to do a one-time token. I go over here, click on the link, paste, and I'm in, okay? So now I just showed you a bunch of different ways to authenticate and to secure a node, but we were talking about AI, right? What does all this have to do with anything? Well, what I want to do is I want to have a single service that vends and validates tokens. And that, my friends, is the job of an authorization server. So I'm going to use the Spring authorization server and have it act as an OAuth IDP, like KeyCloak or Active Directory or Clerk or whatever, right? And I need to refactor this code. Actually, I need to use YAML. Okay, so Spring application name is auth, port is 9090. Okay, and of course, data source is my user. Good, and password is secret, and URL is JDBC : my database. Okay, so we've got now all of this, and I want to specify an OAuth client. OAuth is a specification. I don't know if any of you are already old enough to remember, but like 15 years ago, if I wanted like one website to talk to another, those websites would often ask you to like give them your email, username, and password so they could scan your contacts, right? Can you imagine like giving another website your Gmail password or whatever your email account is so that they can log in, with a program, not like personally, but still the fact that was what we settled for. And so eventually they introduced this protocol called OAuth. And the idea behind OAuth is, hey, I want to give somebody a token that they can use to act on my behalf with a certain API, but they can't like lock me out of my account, right? I still have the ability to revoke the token whenever I want. And so nowadays you see it all over the internet. If you go to like some website, it'll say sign in with Facebook. That's OAuth. And you have to describe, when you do auth, the names of the clients. So let's do that here. I've got a OAuth client config. You can do it with Java, but I've got a YAML definition here. Okay, just to keep things simple. Spring security, and paste. Okay, there we are. So I'm saying that there is one OAuth client one auth client called Spring, and when somebody authenticates as this client successfully on this auth server, they'll be redirected to this client URL where they will get the token, and then they can do things with it. And in this case, our auth client will be our agent, our AI agent, and then the downstream service that it's calling, the MCP service, will use that token to establish identity, right? So this should be up and running. Let's see if it is. .well-known OpenID configuration. There you go. So we have a standard OAuth IDP now, right? This is a standard endpoint that all OAuth endpoints, all OAuth servers will have. So now we have a valid OAuth server. Let's go back to our assistant and reinstate here the security. Okay, add this back. Okay, add that. Add this. Be rid of that. Okay, and we need to add some extra stuff related to the MCP client support. We're going to tell it not to initialize itself. In the code itself, we're going to use one of those experimental projects I told you about earlier in the Spring AI community so that we can set up MCP security. Okay. Return http.with MCP client OAuth 2. Okay. And now, finally, we need to configure the downstream service that's receiving the requests from the AI model, from the AI assistant, right? The agent itself. So in order for that to work, when requests come to this downstream MCP service, we need to be able to, ask the auth server, hey, I just got a request with a token in it. Is it valid? And so to do that, I'll bring in the OAuth resource server support. That's what this is right here. So let's reload this. Oh, I knew it. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Okay. Whew. That was painful. Okay. All right. So let's see. We want to go to our scheduler, the downstream MCP service, and now that I think everything's wired up, but if it's all wired up, we want to say scheduled for dog. I'm going to pass in the dog ID on behalf of the user here. Okay. Dog ID, and then we can get access to the current authenticated user because we have the identity here, right? So get context dot get name. There. Okay. So reload this. And here's our assistant. Reload that. And now we need to URI encoder. Okay. Fantastic. When can I pick up Prancer from the San Francisco Pooch Palace location? Okay. Take that. 127.80.80 ask question equals incognito window. Paste. Oh, what did I do wrong? This is the assistant. Do I have the OAuth client? I do not. Let's just fix that quickly. Oh, also I forgot to specify here the OAuth client specification. So let's fix that as well. Very simple stuff. So here I'm telling this OAuth client to act on behalf of the user using the OAuth client that's registered in the auth server. So now, close that, copy, ask question equals, okay, I get redirected to the auth server. I'm doing a sign in with auth server. It's redirecting me now back to the client, and the client is now going to process my request, but it's going to have an identity. So the date is the 30th of June. And when you go to the scheduler, it says scheduled for this date for dog ID 45 on behalf of the user Josh. So what did we just do? We created an auth server. The auth server can dish out and then validate the use of tokens. The client requests a token when the user shows up without one. It redirects them back to the auth server. Once we get redirected back to the client, which is where the AI agent is, we have a session which has a token in it, and we can use that token when we make our MCP requests, and those get sent to the MCP service. And now we have AI with identity, security, observability, and of course, if you're using Java 25, you should and should be using virtual threads as well. This is where we are so far ahead, my friends. We have an amazing opportunity, right? We have a runtime that is faster, more efficient, more secure, more scalable, more production worthy, more observable, and easier to use. This moment is ours, right? And I know a lot of you are thinking, well, what does it matter? What does it matter if these AI agents, if these AI tools are just writing the code for us? Who cares about how nice this framework is? And I could not be more strenuously in disagreement with that idea, right? I've heard some people say, oh, well, what does it matter? The AI coding assistants will just write assembly for us, who cares? And it's quite the opposite, actually. I think we are finding ourselves in a unique point, right? Where we're starting to realize that, hey, it's been more than 3 years since Dario Amodei famously said that AI will replace all of our engineering jobs, right? I mean, you've seen these images, right? I think you must have. You've seen some of these memes here. Let me get this here. There it is. Okay, you've seen some of these memes here. So AI images. These are all jokes, of course, but have you seen these before? Like them. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Me fighting Skynet, right? Come on, right? This one, kill switch engineer, right? What is this? Job in San Francisco. This is fake, of course, but it's a job at OpenAI. The salary, $300,000 to $500,000 per year, and the job role is pretty great. Listen, we just need someone to stand by the servers all day and unplug them if this thing turns on us. You'll receive extensive training on the code word, which we'll shout if GPT goes off the deep end and starts overthrowing countries. We expect you to be patient, know how to unplug things. Bonus points if you can throw a bucket of water on the servers too, just in case. And also be excited about OpenAI's approach to research, right? Another one. How do tech enthusiasts feel? My entire house is smart. How do tech workers, that's us, feel? The only piece of technology in my house is a printer, and I keep a gun next to it so I can shoot it if it makes a noise I don't recognize, right? I mean, these are all funny jokes about how AI is getting out of hand, but is it? I mean, is it really? I mean, we've been dealing with people telling us that AI is going to replace us for years now, and I think people are starting to realize that it just isn't so, right? And so, for example, there's this, and also quite the contrary. We're also getting tired of bad code being generated by AI slop. So there's this fake RFC here, working group RFC, basically saying, hey, I want to reject AI slop in my code base. And there's a study that came out last year that looked at the effect of AI in large code bases. And the results are kind of stunning, right? Using AI tools, people who know what they're doing in a large code base took 19% longer to complete issues, right? Longer. They didn't complete the issues faster. They took longer, and even worse, they felt like they had gone faster, which is doubly insidious, right? And the result of this is that, we've got so much more code than usual, so much more code. And because we have so much more code, I guess this link isn't working, probably vibe coded, but because we have so much more code, we have so much more churn. People are writing more code than ever. And that code has to be integrated and stabilized, right? IBM said in the 1970s in a management survey, they said basically that you cannot hold a machine accountable. And because you cannot hold a machine accountable, it should never have management powers, basically. It should never be able to make an executive decision. And I think the same is true about AI, right? We're not at a place where I could just have the AI deploy code straight to production, because if that code is wrong, there's consequences. There's real consequences, money and sometimes legal consequences, right? And so you have to have human beings in the loop. And it's more important than ever, especially now that we know how bad sometimes these things can get. And so I think people are realizing that. And then as a result, way back in April of this year, just a couple of months ago, some really interesting news. Data from TrueUp, a tech hiring analytics firm, shows more than 67,000 software engineering job openings, the highest level in over 3 years. So job openings are up for software, right? More than double, roughly double, since the low trough in mid-2023. What does all this mean? My friends, your skills are valuable. You're valuable. Your contributions are valuable. We have an amazing ecosystem. We have an amazing runtime and language. We have an amazing framework in the Spring ecosystem. And we, as Java and Spring developers, are perfectly well situated to seize this moment because we control the business logic where the high-value workflows live. And we are needed. You are needed. And I just want you to know that. You're all amazing. I want to thank you for your time tonight and this morning. I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you very, very much. That was an amazing deep dive. That was a great one into the practical pathways, in the whole Spring Boot ecosystem. Yeah, so I want to quickly open the floor for questions. So please, if you have any question, please raise your hand and you'll be called on. And once again, thank you, Mr. Josh. We appreciate.
Oh, I appreciate you.
So guys, do you have any question? Okay, so from my end, my question is, okay. Please, can you go hi, Jonathan?
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Josh Long, for this wonderful session. The best I've seen, and I am really very happy. My question is actually, since you mentioned open telemetry, I'm wondering if it's come in, it auto-configured within your Spring Boot application, and you don't need any other extra configuration. Then you should be able to see the matrix.
Yeah. Yes. Wait, the question is what? What was the question?
The open telemetry for observability.
Yeah.
So I'm asking if it comes, if it in the Springs in the Spring Boot 4, and if it comes automatically configured, so you don't need to basically have those other extra configurations. So you just only see the matrix. I've seen I've overheard you mention, but I didn't get it.
You should be on stage and I should be in the audience. That's a great point. I forgot to mention that. Yes, that's another thing in Spring Boot 4 and in Spring Framework 7. There is a starter now. We have this project called Micrometer. Micrometer supports metrics and tracing and all that. And for years, it's been possible to configure Micrometer to do open telemetry. But in Spring Boot 4, there's an opinionated, just add the starter, and if you've got Grafana running, it'll automatically send it to there. I did nothing. I just added OpenTelemetry. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, Jonathan, you can go next. Jonathan, please go next.
Yeah, thank you, Bright. Thank you, Josh. So my question is around your. I'm mesmerized with how far you went in short period of time, like touching a lot of stuff around both core Java, Spring Boot. So I want to know, do you do like how do you become this very good? Do you do code challenge, or is it because you've been doing this over a long period of time? Like, I want to compare it with an engineer who works in a company. So you build mostly features, and like you are being paid to do some specific job. So when you finish one task, you do something else. Like, there's no room for repetition for some of these things to stick. So like, yeah.
Yeah. So Spring is, I mean, that's what I work on, right? I work on Spring, so I can focus on it. I appreciate that not everybody has that privilege, obviously, and that's fine. We try to make Spring as, remember, Spring, as you just saw, as you just pointed out, as you very astutely just pointed out, we covered a lot, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. And Spring, you know, we have the core component model, we have Spring Boot, but then we have these verticals, you know, Spring Data focused. And if you want to do Spring Data, you have to understand a little bit about NoSQL and about SQL and, you know, MongoDB and Neo4j and Elasticsearch and Redis and all that. Nobody knows all of that, right? It's impossible. And if you want to do security, you have to know a little bit about security and passkeys and OAuth and basic authentication and authorization. But again, we have a whole team of seasoned full-time security researchers working on this stuff. I can't keep up with all that. That's why we have the framework. The goal here is to take the expertise of all these people working in these verticals, and if you understand that vertical, you will feel right at home using our framework, right? If you understand security, you'll know what good looks like, and you can say, oh, Spring Security looks good, right? But our goal is to make it so that you don't need to be an expert to use it. You can just pull down the happy path sort of code, and we have useful out-of-the-box configuration. So, you know, a lot of what I did, I can only do what I showed you today is I got so far because I didn't have to wire up the boring stuff. You know, I didn't have to set up a web server just so I can start building a web application and so on. So how do I get good at that kind of stuff? Yes, of course, practice, and yes, of course, I am doing this. I you know, it's what I do, right? But also, in general, if you're doing web programming and most people are just trying to build a web app, the surface area of the APIs that you will use in Spring to do that are minimal, right? You just worry about the annotations for controllers, and you're good, right? You want to create an HTTP GET endpoint, use GET mapping. Create add controller on the class, right? We try to reduce it to the simplest possible thing, but no simpler, right? We don't want to remove the actual complexity. We want to make it so that you can focus on the real complexity of what you're doing, and we can focus on the infrastructure. And so hopefully I don't think most people need to know everything. I like to show a smorgasbord. I like to show a little bit of everything, you know. And I'm focusing on AI these days because it's awesome. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting things, and if you know how to apply it and work with it, you can do some interesting things. But I also like, as you can see from the end of the presentation, I also think it's important to be honest about some of the limitations too.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. Please, Tochku, you can go next with your question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. George, for your wonderful presentation and extensive insight in the Spring ecosystem. I kind of want to ask a question around, you mentioned GraphVM. I've quite been exploring about GraalVM, and I've read a couple of articles on GraalVM on how it helps to reduce memory and also increase startup time in the Java ecosystem. So I wanted to know, when I hear GraalVM, is mostly around the what is this our competitor, this closest framework competing with Spring. Um, Guys, you can remind me the closest framework.
Is it .NET?
No. In the Java ecosystem, the closest framework to Spring.
Quarkus?
Is it Quarkus?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. So when you mention GraalVM, it's mostly heated around Quarkus. So I wanted to know, is there something that Spring ecosystem is doing to kind of make it seamless to work with GraalVM and help kind of make Spring Boot more viable in this cloud native era that we are currently moving? I wanted to know if something is going on in that area.
Yeah, I mean, so we added GraalVM support to Spring back in 2022, so 4 years ago. And, you know, you saw I did a native image. This is not a new feature. This has been there for many years. Now, we have a component model that the GraalVM team says they wish everybody else had, right? We worked with them on that component model. So we also worked with the GraalVM team to create the reachability repository. And by the way, just because of the numbers, right? I mean, there was a survey, my friend Alina Yurenka over in GraalVM, they did a survey asking, you know, all the GraalVM users, you know, what percentage of you are using which technologies. Even just a few months after we released Spring Boot 3.0 back in 2022, the very large majority of GraalVM users are Spring users, not Quarkus, not anything. And it's just simple numbers, obviously. But my point is that story has not been their story for years and years and years. It's been our story. I think you're maybe a little out of date.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Okay, but can you say something about enterprise adoption of GraalVM?
Mm-hmm. What was the question?
Yeah, I wanted to say, can you say something about enterprise adoption of GraalVM? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if you have the use case, it's really quite good. I'm seeing a lot of people use it in the AI space because, of course, RAM is at a premium right now, and so GraalVM is really good for that. I love the use cases where people have for shell, like you have Spring Shell, you can build a CLI. It's a native image. You don't have to distribute a JVM to distribute the shell. For startup time, there's been a kind of an interesting development. I mean, have you seen Project Leiden? Leyden. This is it's not one thing. It's a stream of efforts, a series of efforts from the Java team to very, very dramatically optimize startup. And in certain workloads, it does a great job. It's not quite on par with GraalVM, but if you're just trying to make your application start up more quickly, it can do a great job. I've seen it reduce, a startup from 800 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds or something like that, right? And the difference, I love GraalVM. I wrote a book on GraalVM 4 years ago, actually. It's a small book, but it's a book. And the difference between Leyden and GraalVM is that GraalVM sometimes requires that you hold its hand a little bit. You have to kind of finesse it, right? Whereas with Leyden, the proposition is that it just works. Every JVM program will benefit from it, some more than others, but all of them will, and it's a standard thing across all JDKs. So I've seen, like, for example, Netflix just did a big presentation where they said they're using Leyden instead of GraalVM. But me, I love GraalVM. I use it all the time. It's really good. And you can also use, I mentioned the AOT mode earlier, right? You can use that on Leyden or GraalVM, but it was built for GraalVM originally. So yeah, I didn't really speak to your question about enterprise because I can't give away the names of customers, obviously. And I don't know any specific. I mean, I know big companies are using it. I just don't know if I can mention it. Is I guess what I'm trying to say, but they are.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Josh. So
Yes.
my own personal question is, for somebody, just starting out, let us say in Spring Boot, what's your advice? Do they need to first of all go through the whole JDBC, trying to understand how things work behind the scene, or they can, go ahead and start using Spring Boot with all its, dependency injection and, all its offerings straight ahead? Or do you suggest that they go first, deep in first, learn what is happening behind the scene before moving forward?
I don't know. You tell me. The beginning of this presentation, was that helpful?
Yeah, it showed so many things that for me, I haven't even tried that before. Like a lot of things you did.
Well, then maybe, but it wasn't that I spent 40 minutes. So yeah, I think people should do that 40 minutes. Like that, I think some background is good. Daniel Hannemeyer Hansen, he created Ruby on Rails, right? And I don't have a lot of, I don't listen to him a lot because he doesn't, Ruby on Rails is a nightmare, but he does say some interesting things every now and then. One time he did say something interesting. He said something interesting, and he's not, surely he's not the only person to have said it, but he said it really recently. He said, aesthetics are truth. The way your code looks is truth. Basically, beauty is truth. If your code is beautiful, it's probably correct, right? And it's hard to quantify that. Obviously, that's a super subjective thing. But here we are in the world of AI. And as I just said, I think it's more important than ever to be able to understand what that code is doing. Somebody has to sign off on that code. Doesn't matter how you generated it. Somebody has to be accountable for it. And if we're generating more code than ever, and if we have to manage, integrate, stabilize, merge, update more code than ever, then we need abstraction more than ever, right? We need the ability to take for granted more and more stuff and put it beneath us so we can focus on higher order concerns. And that's where a framework is really good, right? Frameworks keep you elevated above the abstraction line, and it reduces the amount of code you have to think about before you can understand what's happening. So I think that skill is more important than ever. But by the same token, you should definitely you should understand the framework. It should be a shortcut, but you can't take a shortcut if you don't know what you're skipping. You know what I'm saying? And so just learn it once and then use the framework to allow you to work with more code more elegantly.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks. So I don't know, is there more questions? And I'm looking through the chat box. There is no question here. The only question we have here on the chat box is, do you need API key when working with Ollama?
No. It's just no. Ollama is, again, you can run it. So Ollama is like Docker. Actually, you can run AI models in Docker too. We support that as well. Docker model runner or whatever it's called. But Ollama is just like a Docker. It's just a container to run models. There's thousands of models out there you can download for free and then run them in Ollama, right? It's, and like I said, I showed you Google's Gemini. I'm not sure if it's exactly Gemini, but it's Google's open weights model. And then I showed you a GPT-OSS, which is OpenAI's model. And those are really quite good, by the way. Like, you can do security analysis with Qwen, right? You can do amazing things, I mean, there are AI models that fit in less RAM than Google Chrome, uses for a stupid browser tab. So you can do amazing things with these models that run locally on your device. Don't let people tell you that you need to pay or whatever.
Okay. thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, I think there are no more questions, right? No more questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Josh. Okay,
Oh, my pleasure.
yeah, one more quiz. Okay, let us take
Okay.
the last question before we close out. Please go on to ending. Yeah, please go on.
It's just a follow-up. So, if I have an AI application that is using Olama, so can to access my application over the internet? Is it? So I
Yeah,
want to know.
I mean, yeah, I think so. I don't see why not.
Right.
As far as I know, yes. But I'm not a lawyer. But as far as I don't see why not, right? I thought that was the whole point, is you can run it. It's not running publicly, if that's your question, but you can let them, right?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. All right. Nelson, your hand is up. Okay, go ahead, please, Nelson, please.
Just a follow-up. I've been hearing about retrieval augmented generation, RAG. So how does this fit into using Olama and AI with Spring as well?
Well, say again?
I said I've been hearing about retrieval augmented generation,
Right.
that's RAG. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
how does this really fit into using it with Spring AI?
Yeah, I showed that the question answer advisor. I should have mentioned it. I'm sorry. That's the pattern I showed is RAG. It's the question answer advisor, where I wrote things to the vector store, and then I used the question answer advisor to query the vector store when I asked questions to the model. That was RAG. It was just so quick you didn't even and if I didn't mention it, you're like you blink and you'll miss it. It's too easy. Sorry. You're great question. See, this is the second person who should have been on stage with me.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Josh. We are very, very happy and blessed, to have you, give us all this knowledge tonight. Yeah, and then we want to, to have you next time. So we'll still reach out to you next time. So please also, also come along and yeah. So and then thank you everyone for showing up for tonight's session. And we have dropped the link to our various channels. There is always, talks like this, monthly sessions like this. There is also the ongoing bootcamp, and it's all free of charge. And there's also the weekly lightning talks, right? So please do well to join the community, and be happy, to speak to you further. Then for I saw some comment that, okay, how do you want to learn Spring Boot? On the channel, there are a lot of information how you go about that in case you're starting out newly on Java, on Spring Boot. There are lots of value there. So please do well to join the community. And thank you everyone. And once again, thank you, Mr. Josh. We appreciate you big time. All
My
right.
pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, good night. Good night.
Night.
Bye-bye.
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 Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.